For decades, we've been told that saturated fats are public enemy number one, clogging our arteries, causing heart disease, and contributing to our longevity concerns. But what if this wasn't the full picture? What if we've been lumping together two very different kinds of fats, unfairly vilifying one, while neglecting its potential to protect our hearts, regulate our metabolism, and even slow aging? I'm Dr. Hilary Lynn, and today we're separating fact from fiction about saturated fats. Specifically, we're diving into the world of odd-chain fatty acids, a fascinating subcategory of fats that might hold the key to better health and longer life. These aren't the saturated fats you find in processed junk foods. Odd-chain fatty acids like C15 are rare, but their health benefits are profound. And as it turns out, a pod of dolphins helped us uncover their secrets. By the end, you'll understand how to apply this to your everyday life so that you can live healthier and longer. So for decades, fats, especially saturated fats, have been seen as dietary villains, blamed for the development of plaque and even causing heart attacks and strokes. But what if we've been misunderstanding them? The truth is far more complex and fascinating to me. Let's take a brief trip through history to understand how fats earned their bad reputation. So in the mid-20th century, early studies linked high-fat diets to increased cholesterol or dyslipidemia and heart disease. These findings led to a massive public health campaign to reduce fat consumption. Foods were reformulated to remove fat and replaced with sugar and refined carbs to maintain good taste. The message was clear: fat is bad, low fat is good. However, over the following decades, while people ate less fat, rates of chronic diseases like obesity, type 2 diabetes, and fatty liver disease skyrocketed. That wasn't what we expected. What was the problem? It turns out that early studies oversimplified the role of fat in the body. It lumped all fats together as harmful and ignored the differences between types of fats. Today, modern research paints a very different picture. We now know that not all fats are created equal. Some fats, like unsaturated fats especially, are essential for health, while others, like trans fats, are definitely harmful. But what we're discussing today is that even within the saturated fat category, we're discovering that some types, like odd-chain fatty acids, might be key to longevity. Understanding this shift in how we view fats is critical to making smarter dietary choices and understanding why some fats, long overlooked, deserve a closer look. So why do fats even matter? Fats are more than just a source of calories. They play essential roles in our cell structure. In fact, fats make up the membranes of every cell in your body and act as gatekeepers to control what enters and what exits. It's like having skin to the cells. If you didn't have it, it would just spread everywhere or explode. Fats also provide a slow burning, efficient source of energy for your body, especially during periods of fasting or exercise when you need that reserve. Some of us might be thinking that we certainly could use less of this extra reserve today, and I agree. In the modern era, we don't really require as much of the fat storage mechanism. Now here it gets a little bit more complicated. In immune regulation, some fats can calm inflammation while others can fuel it. So it really is important to understand the types of fat that you consume and how they affect your long-term health. And finally, brain and hormonal health are deeply affected by the types of fat that you consume. Your brain is nearly 60% fat, and fats are crucial for producing hormones that regulate everything from metabolism to mood. So with so many functions, it's no wonder that fats have such a profound impact on your health and longevity. Now let's get a little bit deeper into the chemistry of fats so we understand why some fats are called saturated and some are called unsaturated. At the molecular level, all fats are chains of carbon atoms with hydrogen atoms attached to them. The structure of these chains determines whether it's classified as saturated or unsaturated. So saturated fats are called that because they're saturated with hydrogen atoms. This creates the straight, rigid chain, and many of them will pack tightly together like a bunch of Legos. As a result, this makes saturated fats solid at room temperature. So think about butter or coconut oil. They're more stable and resistant to oxidation, but their effects in the body really depends on their specific type, which we'll get into. Unsaturated fats, on the other hand, have one or more double bonds in their carbon chain. This causes bends or kinks that make them more fluid because they won't fit together. Kind of if you think back to that Lego example, it's as if there aren't perfect 90-degree angles. Some of the chains of the Legos are not going to be able to fit tightly together. As a result, unsaturated fats are typically liquid at room temperature. Think about olive oil or fish oil. They're also more reactive, meaning that they oxidize more easily. easily. Unsaturated fats are often referred to as good fats for a reason. They're essential for many critical processes in the body. And to break this down even further, because I like to get into the details, there's two main types of unsaturated fats. Unsaturated fats, MUFAs, and polyunsaturated fats, or PUFAs. Monounsaturated fats are known as the heart protectors. MUFAs are found in olive oil, avocados, and nuts. They strike this balance between stability and flexibility, making them incredibly beneficial. So MUFAs help reduce the LDL cholesterol, which is what we sometimes call the bad kind of lipid, while increasing the HDL cholesterol, the good kind. This overall improves our heart health. MUFAs are also resilient to oxidation. So remember we said that the one downside of unsaturated fats is that they are more prone to oxidation. MUFAs are a good balance because they're pretty resilient to oxidation, meaning that they combat harmful free radicals that can spark inflammation and chronic disease. The Mediterranean diet, which is rich in olive oil and MUFAs, has been linked clearly to lower rates of heart disease, stroke, and Alzheimer's disease. And a lot of researchers believe that MUFAs are a key reason for this protective effect. So a lot of researchers believe that MUFAs are the key reason for this protective effect. Now let's talk about PUFAs, or polyunsaturated fats. PUFAs contain two essential fat families, omega-3 and omega fatty acids. Omega-3s, which is a huge favorite topic on this podcast, is a fatty acid found in fatty fish like salmon, flax seeds, and almonds. Omega-3s are well known for their anti-inflammatory and brain-boosting properties. For heart health, omega-3s reduce triglycerides, improve arterial flexibility, and prevent blood clots. For brain health, DHA, which is a type of omega-3, is a major structural component of the brain, and it supports our memory and mood. Omega-6s are controversial. Omega-6s are rather controversial these days. So these are found in nuts, seeds, and vegetable oils. They're essential as well, but they can promote more inflammation when consumed in excess. Balancing your omega-6s with omega-3s is crucial for health. This is a topic I want to dive much deeper in the future because there's a lot of controversy these days about seed oils, omega-6 oils, the balance of omega-6s with omega-3. So unsaturated fats aren't just about preventing disease. They really do promote longevity. They reduce oxidative stress, stabilize cell membranes, and they regulate inflammation. Overall, these types of fats protect your body from the wear and tear of aging. They're like this internal maintenance crew, keeping your cells running smoothly so you can stay active, sharp, and vibrant. You can get these healthy unsaturated fats from avocado, salmon, olive oil. Now that we've explored the benefits of these definitely good fats, let's turn our attention to the more controversial fats, the saturated fats. So for years, saturated fats have been painted with the same broad brush. But the reality is a lot more nuanced. Not all saturated fats are harmful, and some may even be essential for our health, much like the unsaturated fats that we just talked about. So to understand why, let's explore the two major categories. Even chain fatty acids. So remember, saturated fats are chains of carbon atoms surrounded by hydrogen atoms, and they have no double bonds. This structure makes them stable and solid, like the butter or lard at room temperature. Their stability does protect them from oxidation, which is a good thing. However, their effects in the body are more concerning depending on their specific structure and source. So the difference between even chain and odd chain fatty acids comes down to the number of carbon atoms in their chains. So even chain fatty acids, as is obvious from its name, have an even number of carbons. So C14 myristic acid, 16 palmitic acid, or C18 stearic acid have even numbers of carbons. They dominate the saturated fat category and are found in animal fats, palm oil, and lots of processed foods. On the other hand, odd chain fatty acids have an odd number of carbons. So C15 pentadecanoic acid or C17 heptadecanoic acid have an odd number of carbons. Odd chain fatty acids are much rarer in nature, and they're found in very specific foods at low percentages. So whole fat dairy, certain types of fish, and even some kinds of plants. To truly understand the differences between even chain fatty acids and odd chain fatty acids, we need to go beyond their structure and explore how they behave in the body. So their effects aren't just about the number of carbons in their chains. It's actually about how they influence influence metabolism, inflammation, and cellular health. So as we've mentioned, even chain fatty acids dominate most saturated fats in our diet, with C16 palmitic acid and C8 stearic acid being the very most common. So this is how they interact with your cells and other organelles in your body. So this is how they interact with your body. Even chain fatty acids are primarily used as energy sources or stored in fat cells, adipocytes, for later use. And in the modern world of plenty, this function has become less and less relevant or even desired, as you can probably relate. When consumed in excess, particularly from processed foods, even chain fatty acids overwhelm your energy balance, leading to too much fat storage and increased circulating levels of fatty acids in the blood. Excessive even chain fatty acid levels are linked to insulin resistance. So that's where cells fail to respond properly to insulin, and that results in elevated blood sugar and a higher risk of metabolic disease such as type 2 diabetes. Even chain fatty acids, especially C16 or palmitic acid, activate inflammatory pathways. So for example, they interact with toll-like receptors on immune cells, and this triggers this release of pro-inflammatory cytokines, which are messengers, such as TNF-alpha and IL-6. This results in a chronic low-grade inflammation, damaging tissues over time and contributing to chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and even certain types of cancer. Even chain fatty acids also tend to raise your LDL cholesterol, which is that bad kind of lipid, while having little effect on HDL cholesterol, which is the good kind. So LDL particles can accumulate in the artery walls, leading to plaque buildup and increased risk of heart attacks and strokes. Even chain fatty acids also contribute to the formation of small, dense LDL particles, which are particularly harmful because they're more likely to get trapped in arterial walls, leading to that oxidation, plaque formation, and health outcomes like the heart attacks and strokes. Odd chain fatty acids, on the other hand, such as C15 and C17, are much, much rarer in the diet, and they have dramatically different effects compared to even chain fatty acids. So odd chain fatty acids actually reduce inflammation, and they do this by interacting with cellular signaling pathways. So odd chain fatty acids will inhibit or stop the release of the pro-inflammatory molecules like MCP1, which typically recruits immune cells to inflamed tissues. They also lower levels of those cytokines or messengers like IL-6, reducing the overall inflammatory burden. This overall results in protecting tissues from chronic damage and reducing the risks of diseases linked to inflammation, such as the heart disease, the diabetes, and the fatty liver disease you hear so much about. Odd-chain fatty acids also improve our lipid profiles by lowering triglycerides and total cholesterol levels while maintaining healthy levels of that good kind of HDL cholesterol. So how does this all work? It turns out that unlike even chain fatty acids, odd chain fatty acids can influence the liver's lipid metabolism pathways directly in a way that promotes this good balance rather than excess of the bad lipids. And this overall leads to lower risk of plaque buildup and cardiovascular events. In addition, odd chain fatty acids are functioning at the subcellular level. It turns out that they improve our mitochondrial function. So remember, these are the powerhouses of our cells, and they reduce the production of reactive oxygen species, unstable molecules that damage the cells and accelerate aging. By stabilizing mitochondrial membranes, the odd chain fatty acids help the cells produce more energy more efficiently. So that also reduces fatigue and supports cellular health overall. And as related to our topic on hand, this protects against age-related diseases and promotes longevity. There's emerging evidence in research showing that odd chain fatty acids like C17 and particularly C15, which may function as essential nutrients. So essential means that they cannot be produced in sufficient amounts by the body and must be obtained through diet. The key evidence shows that C15 acts as a partial agonist of PPAR alpha and PPAR delta. These are nuclear receptors that regulate the genes involved in metabolism, inflammation, and mitochondrial function. This activity actually mirrors the benefits of those fantastic unsaturated fats that we talk about all the time, omega-3 fatty acids. So it really positions the odd chain fatty acids as potentially essential and just as good as omega-3s for optimal health and longevity. When we talk about longevity, we're really not just talking about adding years to your life. Remember, we're at also talking about adding quality to those years. So odd chain fatty acids may help expand our health span, that period of life when you're healthy, active, and thriving, by protecting against those age-related diseases like heart attacks, heart disease in general, and diabetes, improving our brain health by reducing the inflammation and improving cellular energy, enhancing mitochondrial function, which is essential, especially as we age. So what have we covered so far? Here's a quick description, overview of what we've discussed on why the form of fat matters so much to our health. So even chain fatty acids are straight carbon chains with even numbers of atoms like C16 and C18, while odd chain fatty acids like C15 and C17 have an odd number of carbons. Even chain fatty acids dominate processed foods, fatty meats, and palm oil, whereas odd chain fatty acids are super rare, found in whole fat dairy, certain fish, and plants. Even chain fatty acids activate immune pathways, fueling inflammation, whereas odd chain fatty acids suppress inflammatory signals, reducing chronic inflammation. Even chain fatty acids will raise your bad or LDL cholesterol levels, increasing plaque buildup, whereas the odd chain fatty acids will improve balance, lowering overall cholesterol levels and supporting the healthy HDL cholesterol levels. And whereas even chain fatty acids will store excess energy as fat and contribute to insulin resistance, odd chain fatty acids improve mitochondrial function, reduce oxidative stress, and boost energy production. Finally, we know that we get plenty of even chain fatty acids through our body's own synthesis, meaning that we don't need to get them from our diet or supplementation. Odd chain fatty acids, however, may be essential because we produce just a small amount in our bodies and we don't get nearly enough, meaning that we need greater dietary intake for optimal levels. So sometimes I get the question, why haven't we heard more before now about these miraculous odd chain fatty acids? The problem is that decades ago, when researchers were first looking at fats and heart disease, they didn't have the tools to differentiate between the subtypes of saturated fats. It was just easier to say all saturated fats are bad, rather than some are harmful and some are essential. So when we slash saturated fats from our diet, we actually threw the baby out with the bathwater, cutting out odd chain fats with the harmful even chained ones. It actually took a miraculous discovery and a lot of luck to discover the benefits of odd chain fatty acids. So for C15, the journey began not in a lab, but in the ocean with the US Navy's dolphins. These highly trained dolphins weren't just fascinating and useful in the Navy, they actually provided a uniquely controlled environment for studying health and aging. It turns out that in the Navy, they had this highly regulated lifestyle. They live under tightly controlled conditions and eat carefully prepared diets and undergo routine health monitoring and live in a stress minimized environment. This eliminates many of the variables that complicate human health studies, such as fluctuating diets, exercise habits, and environmental exposures. This control allowed researchers to isolate key factors influencing the dolphin's health, making it easier to pinpoint the impact of specific nutrients like C15. So Dr. Stephanie Van Watson, a veterinary epidemiologist who worked with the Navy, started noticing this puzzling trend. Some of the dolphins were thriving well into their older years, while some developed chronic conditions like metabolic syndrome, fatty liver disease, and anemia, even though all the dolphins shared identical diets and living conditions. This inconsistency hinted at a deeper biological factor. By analyzing blood samples from hundreds of dolphins, Dr. Van Watson discovered that higher levels of C15, an odd chain fatty acid, were strongly correlated with better overall health. The healthier dolphins had lower levels of inflammation, more stable red blood cells, and improved metabolic function. So after uncovering C15's role in dolphin health, Dr. Van Watson and her team began exploring its potential benefits for humans. So here's what the research has revealed so far. Human studies have validated that C15 reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha. It also enhances mitochondrial efficiency and reduces production of reactive oxygen species. C15 also lowers triglycerides and total cholesterol while supporting the HDL cholesterol levels. And finally, C15 strengthens the red blood cell membranes, reducing fragility. This is crucial for preventing anemia and maintaining oxygen delivery to tissues. And the research didn't stop at dolphins. Early human studies have confirmed many of these same benefits in humans. This suggests that C15 isn't just promising, it might actually be essential, meaning that our bodies can't produce it in sufficient quantities and we would benefit from actively trying to eat more of it. So now you might be thinking, I'll just eat some butter and whole fat yogurt. Problem solved, right? Not quite. So, while whole fat dairy, fatty fish, and fermented foods are natural sources of odd chain fatty acids, relying on diet alone to meet your needs can be surprisingly challenging. It turns out that odd chain fatty acids like C15 and C17 are present in whole fat dairy and certain fish, but only in trace amounts. For example, whole fat milk contains just 1% of C15 and even less C17. To reach the levels studied for their health benefits, you'd need to consume impractical quantities of these foods, bottles and bottles, liters and liters of whole fat milk, for example. And that brings along with it potentially harmful amounts of even chain fatty acids linked to inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. In addition, today's typical diet is overloaded with even chain fatty acids from processed foods, vegetable oils, and fatty meats. And sources of odd chain fatty acids are super rare. This imbalance contributes to the inflammation and metabolic issues we talked about and makes it even worse to try and add the healthy sources, for example, from the whole fat dairy. People who follow plant-based and vegan diets face an additional hurdle. There's a huge lack of meaningful dietary sources of odd chain fatty acids in a plant-based diet, making it nearly impossible to meet optimal levels naturally. But as a quick note for everybody, our body actually can produce small amounts of odd chain fatty acids on its own, and this is thanks to dietary fiber. So when you consume fermentable fibers like inulin, your gut bacteria produces propionate, which is a precursor that your liver can then convert into odd chain fatty acids. If you want to boost this, and I recommend this for everybody, aim for at least 30 grams of dietary fiber daily, focusing on fermentable sources like inulin-rich foods, chicory root, Jerusalem artichokes, onions, and garlic. There's also oats, legumes, and flax seeds, which can be helpful. And studies actually do support that increasing fiber intake can raise your C15 levels by 17% and C17 levels by 11%. However, as you can tell, these increases are still very modest, and you still need to consume C15 and C17 in other sources. Before we dive into that, I want to offer some nuance for what populations it may make more sense to try and get odd chain fatty acids from diet and what populations it's just simply too impractical for. People who have perfectly optimized lipids may be able to try and get more whole food sources of odd chain fatty acids. And this can be beneficial because whole fat dairy provides not just the odd chain fatty acids, but also some essential vitamins like A, D, E, and K. However, if your body is prone to high LDL cholesterol or inflammation, you might need to limit your dairy intake, especially the whole fat dairy. Finding the right balance for your body is key. So consider these next steps working with your doctor to create the proper diet to try and get more odd chain fatty acids in your body. First, you have to understand your cholesterol response. Routine blood work can identify whether you're insulin sensitive or insulin resistant. Insulin resistant individuals might actually tolerate whole fat dairy better only because their body knows that we need to resist absorbing even more of the saturated fats. If you are insulin sensitive and lean, ironically, you're in a more optimized health state, but your body is going to suck up all of the fats from your diet a bit more. To get even more detailed and accurate, you might want to ask your doctor about sterile panel testing, which can help you assess cholesterol absorption and synthesis markers for a much more tailored approach. For everyone across the board, it can be helpful to increase your fiber intake and focus on fermentable fibers to boost your body's natural odd chain fatty acid production. And if it's appropriate for you, you can increase whole fat dairy from grass-fed whole fat options like butter or yogurt. Remember, this is only if your cholesterol profile supports it. And unfortunately, in my years of practicing in primary care and longevity, there's very few people who have completely optimized lipid panels. Finally, for consistency and therapeutic dosing, there are some odd chain fatty acid supplements now coming to market. So Fatty 15 is a reliable option because it's been well studied and it's manufactured under thoughtful conditions. Fatty 15 delivers pure C15 without the excess even chain fatty acids found in food sources. So food is a fantastic starting point, but it's rarely enough to achieve optimal odd chain fatty acid levels. A more personalized approach combining fiber, carefully chosen dietary sources, and supplements can help you harness the full benefits of odd chain fatty acids. So Fatty 15 is the first pure C15 supplement developed based on rigorous research. Human studies show it improves markers like inflammation, lipid profiles, and mitochondrial function. It's a single ingredient supplement free from contaminants and additives with a high bioavailability to ensure that your body can absorb and use it effectively. And early studies do suggest that C15 is safe for long-term use. The Fatty 15 supplement is designed to mimic the natural levels of C15 in a super optimized healthy diet, making it safe and practical for long-term use. So as a physician, I always say it's best to optimize your diet first before you add on supplements. But in this scenario, supplementation can really fill a critical gap because odd chain fatty acids simply are missing from the food chain now in the modern farming, especially of fish sources. And it's very, very difficult to obtain it in therapeutic amounts through diet changes alone. So, as we've explored today, odd chain fatty acids like C15 and C17 hold a lot of promise. The science supporting their benefits, from reducing inflammation to improving mitochondrial function and supporting healthy aging, is compelling. It's clear that these fats play an important role in health, and I'm genuinely excited about their potential. That being said, I believe it's important to approach this with balance. While the early research is encouraging and supplements like Fatty 15 provide an accessible option for those looking to optimize their health, we still need more studies to fully understand how odd chain fatty acids work across different populations and health conditions. Taking a supplement isn't cheap, especially if you intend on taking it forever. And I don't think everyone needs to rush to add it to the regimen just yet. What I do know is this: odd chain fatty acids, particularly C15, have a unique and exciting role in health and longevity, and having a high quality option like Fatty 15 available is a great step forward. I'm confident we'll see even more innovation in this space as the longevity community continues to explore these compounds. For now, I encourage you to think about how this information fits into your overall health strategy and rethink saturated, unsaturated, odd chain fatty acids, even chain fatty acids. So whether it's through small dietary shifts, exploring supplements, getting your lab work done with your doctor, or just staying tuned for future research, the key is to make informed choices that align with your health and longevity goals.